Amanda's fingers trembled as she traced a circle of salt around her feet, feeling the coarse grains beneath her hands. She whispered the words the Babalawo had taught her, an incantation woven with prayers. For 10 years, her voice had lifted every night with the same ache, begging whatever force that held her to release her from this hollow existence. She had tried everything, prayers, potions, even old charms passed down from her mother's mother. But nothing filled the quiet, empty space where a child's cry should have been. Tonight, the salt circle was her last resort. The Babalawo had warned her, the curse that binds you is deep as bone. Don't try to break it with shallow offerings. And yet, Amanda's heart was too tired to care. She just wanted release, one way or another. The street stretched in a narrow line of dim lights and whispering shadows. As she rose, dusting salt from her fingers, a movement flickered at the far end of Amama Street. There, on the cracked pavement, a woman sat under a lamp that sputtered and spat light like it resented its task. Her clothes were little more than tattered rags, her hair wild with dust and neglect. But it was a woman's belly, round and hard as a full moon, that pulled Amanda's gaze. She was unmistakably pregnant. Amanda drew closer, her heart pounding in her chest. Every sensible thought told her to turn back. Pregnant women were no rare sight, and this one appeared lost to the world, muttering to herself in ragged breaths. But something inside Amanda twisted, a pull as sharp as a fishhook in her throat, urging her closer. Each night after that, she found herself returning to Amama Street, always just after sundown, a bag of food clutched to her chest. She would wait until the street was empty, then quietly leave the food within the mad woman's reach, watching from a distance as she devoured each meal. The woman's hunger was a dark mirror to Amanda's own, a reflection of all the things she craved and gone without. But on the 7th night, the ritual broke. The air was colder than usual, a prickling chill that settled in Amanda's bones. The street was silent, the woman huddled in her usual spot, her head bowed low. But something felt different, a stillness, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Amanda moved closer, and that was when she saw it, a dampness spreading under the woman, glistening in the faint light. Amanda's heart clenched. The woman was in labor. The mad woman's head jerked up as Amanda approached, her eyes wild and wide. She hissed, the sound throaty, more animal than human, but Amanda crouched beside her, her hands steady despite the rush of fear. "I'm here to help," she whispered, more to herself than to the woman, but the words seemed to settle something in the air. The woman's gaze softened, and she let out a long, shuddering breath. Guided by instinct she hadn't known she possessed, Amanda took charge, whispering calming words and bracing the woman as she pushed. Hours passed, the street growing darker and colder, until, with one last cry, the woman's labor ended, and Amanda found herself holding a tiny, fragile life in her hands. A baby girl, small and wrinkled, her face scrunched in a newborn's first confusion. Amanda looked down, her heart swelling with a fierce, protective love that was as immediate as it was terrifying. The woman lay back, her eyes already fluttering closed, exhaustion claiming her. But Amanda barely noticed. Her gaze was locked on the child. She couldn't explain it, but in that moment, it was as if the years of longing, the ache that had consumed her, all coalesced into this one fragile being. It was a strange, desperate thought. This child could be mine, Amanda said to herself. Without fully realizing what she was doing, Amanda drew the baby closer, her arms cradling the tiny form. The woman murmured in her sleep, her head lolling to one side, and Amanda felt a pang of guilt, sharp as a blade. She told herself she'd only take the child for tonight, just to be sure she was safe. But as she slipped away from Amama Street, the baby pressed close to her heart. A whisper in the back of her mind told her this was only the beginning. The baby's cries filled the silent house as Amanda crept through the front door, clutching the bundle against her chest. She'd wrapped the child in her shawl, bundling her carefully against the night's chill, but the baby's soft wails had already begun to rise, her tiny fists waving in the air. Amanda's heart raced as she shushed her, glancing toward the closed bedroom door where her husband, Chika, lay sleeping. She didn't know what she would tell him if he woke. She hadn't thought that far ahead, too overwhelmed by the heat of the moment and the pull of the child against her chest. All she knew was that she couldn't leave this fragile life alone in the cold, not after everything she had been through, every empty year that had left her heart aching for a child. Amanda gently placed the baby on the sofa, staring down at her in the faint light. The child's eyes fluttered open and shut, her tiny mouth working in an effort to find comfort. Without thinking, Amanda stroked her cheek, humming a lullaby she'd heard countless times in her dreams. Slowly, the baby quieted, her cries softening into small whimpers until, at last, she fell into a quiet sleep. A creak from the hallway sent Amanda's heart into her throat. She turned to see Chika standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with confusion as he took in the scene, the baby wrapped in his wife's shawl, Amanda's pale face streaked with sweat and dirt, her hands hovering protectively over the child. What is this?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep and disbelief. Amanda swallowed hard. "Chika," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I found her, or maybe she found me. It's a miracle, Chika." She tried to smile, but her lips quivered. I helped her mother bring her into this world tonight. But the mother, she's unwell. She can't care for her." Chika's face twisted with a mixture of shock and concern. He glanced from the baby to Amanda, his brows knitting together. "Are you saying you brought her here to stay?" Amanda hesitated, feeling the weight of his question. She knew what he was asking, the risk, the consequences, the truth of the situation. But looking down at the tiny face nestled in the folds of her shawl, she couldn't bring herself to say no. "Just for now," she murmured. "Only until we know she's safe." Chika sighed, running a hand through his hair as he turned away. "Amanda, this is madness. You're bringing trouble into our home. What if someone finds out? What will the neighbors say?" "We'll say she's ours," Amanda said softly, her voice steady. "We'll say we were blessed." She met his gaze, a fierce determination in her eyes. "No one needs to know the truth, Chika. Not if we don't tell them." For a long moment, Chika stared at her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded, though his eyes were shadowed with doubt. "All right," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "But this will stay between us. No one else can know." Amanda nodded, relief flooding through her. She reached down, lifting the baby into her arms, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe that everything would be all right. She would be a mother at last. The curse, whatever it was that had stolen her dreams of motherhood, had been broken. She would love this child, protect her, raise her as her own. But as she looked down at the baby's sleeping face, she remembered the mad woman's glazed eyes, the strange, throaty muttering, the way she had clutched her belly as if guarding something precious, something powerful. The curse that had haunted Amanda's life felt far from broken. If anything, it felt like it had only just begun. Days slipped by like whispers, each one blurring into the next as Amanda fell into the rhythm of caring for the child. She named the baby Ada, after her own mother, feeling as if the name anchored her to something larger, something that could protect them both. In those first days, Amanda hardly left Ada's side. Every cry, every tiny movement tugged at her heart, filling the hollow spaces she'd carried for years. Chika, though hesitant at first, began to soften. He would sometimes watch from the doorway as Amanda fed and rocked Ada, his face unreadable, but his eyes held a warmth that Amanda hadn't seen in years. Little by little, Chika accepted the child's presence, his resistance melting into cautious affection. But as the weeks went by, something strange began to happen in their home. At night, Amanda would wake to the sound of whispers, faint and broken, drifting from the shadows like a distant song she couldn't quite make out. Sometimes she would feel a presence hovering just beyond her reach, something cold and watchful. She told herself it was nothing, just the anxiety of keeping Ada's origins a secret, the weight of guilt pressing down on her shoulders. But the whispers grew louder. One night, as she was lying in bed, a shadow shifted across the wall, long and spindly, like fingers reaching for her. Amanda gasped, sitting up with a start, her heart pounding. She glanced over at Chika, who lay fast asleep beside her, oblivious. She tried to convince herself that it was only her imagination, a trick of the dim light, but something in the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were breathing. That was when she first heard the voice, a soft, rasping whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I want her back. The words slithered through the darkness, coiling around her like smoke. Amanda's chest tightened, her breath catching in her throat. She scanned the room, but there was no one there, only the shadows pooling in the corners, thick and unmoving. She clutched at the blanket, her hands trembling. Surely, she thought, this was the curse, creeping back into her life, clawing at her from the edges. But she couldn't give Ada back. Not now, not ever. Ada was her daughter, her blessing, her proof that the years of emptiness had not been in vain. The next morning, Amanda dismissed the experience as a nightmare, brushing it aside as the result of too little sleep and too much worry. She tried to bury the fear, focusing instead on Ada's gentle coos and tiny, curious hands. But as the days wore on, the sense of desperation only grew. One evening, as Amanda was washing dishes, she glanced out the kitchen window and froze. Across the street, under the orange glow of a street lamp, she saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was the madwoman. The woman's hair hung in matted clumps around her face, her clothes nothing more than torn rags clinging to her thin frame. But her eyes were sharp and bright, locked onto Amanda with a look that sent a chill down her spine. Amanda couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as the woman lifted one bony hand and pointed directly at her. Amanda staggered back, the plate slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. She turned away, her heart racing, and when she looked back, the woman was gone, vanished into the night as if she'd never been there at all. But Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that the woman's gaze had pierced through hair, seen right into her soul, into the secret she carried. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard the whisper again, closer this time, harsher. Give her back, or I'll take her myself. Fear gripped her, cold and relentless. She clutched Ada close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest, her mind spinning with 1,000 fears and questions. She knew she couldn't keep ignoring the signs. The curse wasn't broken, it was growing stronger, feeding off her lie, her theft. The choice she had made on that night, the moment she'd taken Ada into her arms, had awakened something dark, something relentless. And now, it was coming for her. Amanda's days turned into a blur of worry and sleepless nights. The whispers lingered in the shadows, haunting her every moment, their demand echoing in her mind. Fearing that if she looked too long, she might see something lurking behind her, a shadow or perhaps the madwoman's accusing gaze. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside felt like a threat. Chika noticed the change. He would touch her arm, his eyes searching her face, but Amanda couldn't bring herself to share what she was experiencing. She feared he would demand they return Ada, and she couldn't risk losing the child that had filled the emptiness in her heart. But the isolation wore on her, and one night, the weight of it all broke her silence. Chika, something's wrong, she whispered as they lay in bed, her voice barely a breath. It's as if there's something here, something that doesn't want Ada with us. Chika frowned, reaching out to hold her hand. What are you talking about? She comes to me, Chika, Amanda said, her voice cracking. The mad woman. I see her in the shadows. She tells me to give Ada back. Her hand shook as she spoke, her eyes wide with fear. I think she cursed me. That's why I've never been able to have a child. And now she's come for Ada. Chika held her tightly, his arms warm and steady. Amanda, you're exhausted, he murmured. You're working yourself up. Maybe you're just afraid because of how we got Ada. But that woman, she was gone when you left, wasn't she? How could she be haunting you? But Amanda pulled away, her face tense. You didn't see her, Chika. She was standing right there, under the street lamp, watching me. I swear it. Chika's mouth tightened, his brows furrowing as he looked at her. If it would give you peace, we could go see a healer, someone who could lift this curse you think is over us. Amanda swallowed the word. He looked, filling her with a strange sense of hope. Perhaps there was someone who could silence the whispers and protect her family from the mad woman's reach. She nodded slowly. Yes, let's find someone who can help us. The following day, they traveled to the neighboring village, seeking out an old woman known for her knowledge of curses and the supernatural. Her small hut sat under a twisted tree, and as they approached, Amanda felt an unsettling sensation, a tingling across her skin as if she were being seen by eyes she couldn't see in return. The old woman greeted them with a look that seemed to pierce through Amanda, her eyes bright and sharp despite her age. "You've come with a heavy burden," she said, her voice crackling like dry leaves. Amanda nodded, clutching Ada close as she explained the events of the past few weeks. The whispers, the shadowy figures, the mad woman's curse. The old woman listened silently, her face grave, and when Amanda finished, she closed her eyes, muttering words under her breath that Amanda didn't understand. Finally, the woman opened her eyes and fixed her gaze on Amanda. "You've taken what doesn't belong to you," she said, her voice low. "The child's blood is bound to another, and the spirit of her mother will not rest until she is returned." Amanda's breath caught, her grip on Ada tightening. "But I saved her," she whispered. "I took her to give her a better life. I only wanted to love her." The old woman's gaze softened slightly, but her voice remained stern. "Love cannot undo a claim. The mad woman's spirit is strong, and her anger festers. She sees you, Amanda, and she will follow you until balance is restored." Chika's hand tightened on Amanda's shoulder, his voice barely a whisper. "Is there no way to protect our family? To keep Ada with us?" The old woman looked at them both, her expression somber. "Only if the mother's spirit releases her claim willingly. But that can only happen if she is made to see that her child is safe and loved. You must confront her spirit directly, lay bare your heart, and ask for her blessing." Amanda's heart thudded in her chest. She had to face the mad woman, the very thing she feared most. But for Ada, for the child she loved as her own, she would do it. The old woman placed a hand on Ada's head, murmuring a protective chant before handing Amanda a small amulet. "Wear this, and it will shield you from her rage. But remember, spirits are not easily swayed. You must be ready for whatever she demands." With a heavy heart, Amanda nodded. She looked down at Ada's sleeping face, vowing to protect her no matter the cost. That night, as darkness settled around their home, Amanda knew it was time. She waited until the house was still, then slipped outside, the amulet warm against her skin. The air was thick with an unnatural silence, pressing down on her like a weight. She stepped into the shadows, her heart pounding, and whispered, "I know you're here. Show yourself. I'm ready." A shiver ran through the air, and slowly, out of the darkness, the figure of the mad woman emerged, her eyes blazing with fury and sorrow. Amanda's voice shook, but she held her ground. "I took your child because I wanted to give her a life you couldn't give her. She is safe with me. She is loved. But if you will not give her up, then take me instead. I'll give you my life in return for hers." The mad woman stared at her, her gaze piercing, as the shadows around them grew darker and heavier. Kindly like and subscribe for more stories like this. Tell us what you feel in the comments. Thanks for watching.